Hey folks, David Stewart here. Time for your daily trending for the 13th of June 2020. Before I dig into all of the happenings in Twitter, let me point out this to you guys. So if you go over to the Google search engine and you type in Winston Churchill, you're going to notice that there is a big blank square where you should see the Honorable Winston Churchill. Now, this is something that I'm assuming had to be done manually, and this is not the first time Google has manipulated their search results and manipulated what's called the above-the-fold search results. This is something that some people have looked at as a possible antitrust issue because Google does this to keep you on their site rather than to direct you towards other sites. They give you this kind of information up here. They put all the images in their image tab so you don't ever really have to leave the Google environment. But that's a completely different issue. The point is, Winston Churchill is missing, and I don't think it's because he frequently had a cigar in his mouth. I think it is because somebody, they defaced the statue of Winston Churchill, and somebody in the company agreed with that, and so they defaced him digitally. They rubbed him out of existence. Not the first time they did this. If you guys remember back, you used to type in American inventors. This is what American inventors looks like now. It used to be you typed it in and it showed you nothing but African American inventors. Now you do get Thomas Edison, but you get a lot of African American inventors, and you got to start scrolling all the way over before you start seeing some of the more famous white ones. And this is a little bit more fair than it used to be, but it's clearly a manipulation of what's going on, especially this above the fold type of display here. Another old one that someone reminded me of on Twitter, European people art. Actually, Javon Brown reminded me on Twitter of this one. You type in European people art and you get this display of clearly not Europeans. You get nothing but Africans. And they even made a little mistake here because whoever did this clearly thought this guy was African. His name is Scipio Africanus. He's Roman. His bust happens to be in this darkened bronze color, and he's actually Roman, so he's actually European, and he gets the name Africanus as an award name for his conquest and his military victories in the African continent. He was the one who defeated Hannibal in the Second Punic War. Very, very famous general. In fact, I think I have a little shirt that you can buy with Scipio's face on it that I put out for fun. If you want to support my merchandise, it's probably linked down below the video if you want to take a look at that. So this is another example of some manual manipulation, I guess, to just thumb the nose at people who actually want something specific to see. But anyway, I thought I'd point that one out. He's been scrubbed. Let's hop over into Twitter. Trump is not well. Trump walked slowly down a ramp. Therefore, people think he has dementia or Parkinson's. That's the sum up here. And of course, Orange Man bad and everybody bad. And they're like, Trump is drinking water with both hands. And it's like, okay. He might not have been feeling great that day. He's 74 years old. You're not going to have 100% great days when you're old. And I don't think it's anything big to worry about, but of course, there's always like a laser eye on him. Anything that they can find, especially physical, to try to degrade him with, they're going to do that. Now, this video is probably going to be demonetized anyway, so we'll just go ahead and look at the UFC fight. Most of these videos, by the way, are demonetized because I tend to show things like people getting knocked out in the UFC fight. Great little knockout there. This looked like a pretty cool card with lots of knockouts. Knockouts are always exciting for people. People like when fights finish. Fights that go the distance are just not quite as fun. So I feel like a lot of UFC fans, myself included, if I'm going far enough back, really like to see the action of somebody really, finishing the fight, not just standing there and being defensive for an entire 5-round title fight or whatever it is. I think it's 5 rounds for the title fights, and then having a decision awarded to him. I think there was a lot of complaints about St. Pierre because he wouldn't finish these fights a lot of times, and he's like, of course, well, I'm going to win if I can avoid being knocked out. So that's kind of the goal there. And then here's a decision. When it comes down to decision, you're always a little nervous, but I think people really like to watch the fights get finished. So there's a UFC Vegas too. Now, Rayshard Brooks, this is another black man killed by police. And I'm not going to comment too much on this because, like every other incident that's happened with this, the actual facts, when they come out later, are always going to paint a different picture than the agitators want. Remember, most of what the media does is agitprop. It's there to agitate people and upset them and make them feel addicted with fear to clicking on those headlines. But it takes a couple days for all of the realities to come out. Now, it says on here that he was shot in a Wendy's drive-in, but I've already seen people commenting that he was sleeping in a car in a Wendy's parking lot, and they shot him 3 times in the back. So clearly he wasn't in the car, because that would have been very difficult to shoot him 3 times in the back whilst he was in the car. But I guarantee you that there's more to this than what we're being told, but that's not the point. The point is to agitate as much as possible, to create as much chaos as possible, to make people feel as much fear as possible, to try to get the mob riled up to destroy as much property and hurt as many people as possible. That's the point of this. And it takes a while for all the facts to come out. We still don't have all the facts in the George Floyd case because we still haven't seen the body cam footage. We still don't know a good deal of what actually happened, including there's multiple accounts of what his cause of death actually is. So it takes a while for these things to come out, and that's the way it is. I've heard, and I'm trying to remember who said this. It might have been in one of the many Taleb quotes that are out there. If you want to cure yourself of reading newspapers, spend a month reading newspapers that are 1 week old. And I've said this before, that most news is actually false. Not in the fake news sense like we talk about, where they're manipulating facts, they're presenting things out of order, and they're inserting opinions into what would otherwise be a journalistic piece in order to cause people to come to a conclusion that is false. I mean, they're flat out false in that within several days of an event happening, all of the facts are recontextualized, more facts emerge, so that the things which were true on Tuesday are actually not true on Friday, which means they weren't true on Tuesday either. It's just that was what we thought was true on Tuesday. So most news is actually completely false. And if you look at predictions, just 1 week old predictions, you'll get a very, very quick understanding that most people making predictions are just guessing. They have no basis to make the predictions, and they're really bad at them. So you shouldn't trust most people making predictions. So that's my big point on news. It's part of the fake news cycle. Reality is most news is false. You could read newspapers that are a year old. Go back and on this day, read a newspaper from today, but last year, and see how much of it was true and how much of it was actually relevant, because it's going to be full of things that are not even remotely relevant to your current life. Which means if you're really addicted into that news cycle of looking at news and seeing what's going on every single second of the day, like I remember, it's a boomer thing in older generations. They like scoff at the young people for not reading the newspaper cover to cover every day. But literally what they're reading cover to cover every day is false, as I've described. And if you go a year in the future, what they've read cover to cover is irrelevant, which means they're really wasting their time reading newspapers, even if the newspapers are not fake news, which they are for the most part. The Dream is Over party. I don't know what this one is. So somebody got it trending. Don't know what that is. SpongeBob. Okay, so this is Nickelodeon showing all of their characters as gay characters. Nickelodeon celebrating Pride Month with the LGBTQP WXRZ plus community and their allies this month. And this is from Shu, I guess. SpongeBob is asexual, not gay, says the creator. So why does asexual end up in the pride flag? Isn't that just like you have a low sex drive and therefore you should be part of rainbow flags? I don't understand that. Shouldn't that mean that you're not part of any flag? So this is something that I actually find very disturbing, is impressing upon children's cartoons that are absent sexuality some sexual identity, whether it's, quote, because now asexual is a sexual identity. Try to square that circle. It's like, I don't really care about having sex. I'm part of Pride. I'm proud of not really caring. It's like, isn't that, shouldn't you be a monk or something? It's like, that seems like it makes a certain career a little bit easier. You could easily go in for the celibate lifestyle if you have no sex drive, I guess. But anyway, the impressing upon children's characters any kind of sexuality when they are absent that, I find it actually not just disturbing, but I find it morally bad. I find it reprehensible, because children are not to be subjected to sexual identity, which they don't understand and can't understand until they're older. Nor should parents have to take the time to explain how, shall we say, non-typical sexuality works, right? Heterosexuality being the typical way that sexuality works. Especially a 7-year-old may understand how sex works and where babies come from, but then they're like, well, why are there two men getting married? How do they have sex and have babies? And they don't. How do you explain that to a kid? It's really, it moves them into an area where you have to discuss perverse things such as sodomy, and no parent wants to do that. I certainly don't want to do that as a parent. But moreover, impressing this kind of agenda upon children's cartoons is quite disgusting, and Nickelodeon should be ashamed of doing it. And luckily, I don't have cable, so I don't even have to boycott them. I don't watch them as it is. This looks like a fun one. Karen's Gone Wild. I know that people don't like being called Karen if they're Karen. I know that the people most offended by the word Karen are Karens, and I find that to be really, really just the funniest thing. I think from now on, if I'm going to write angry middle-aged women complaining to managers, they're all going to be called Karen. And it's just like the default name now. So that looks like a fun one. Bunch of videos of women being jerks. Let's see if there's anything else here. Hawaiian Punch. Remember Hawaiian Punch? I think I remember. I remember the commercials a little bit. Not too much else going on today. So I thought I'd point out the whole scrubbing of Winston Churchill thing, because I thought that was quite interesting. Other news, and I'll make a longer video on this. Magic the Gathering is going to ban a bunch of cards because they think they're offensive, including a card called Crusade, and I have a solution for you, but I'll put that in a different video. Thanks so much for watching this one. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and make sure you pay attention tomorrow because I'll probably have some giveaways going on. So thanks so much, and I'll see you guys next time.